Hello and welcome to Rising. We've got another excellent show for you today, including a number of really good interviews, including one right now at the top of the show. So let's get to our first story. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange was greeted with cheers in Australia as he stepped off the plane in Canberra, Australia, the country where he grew up. This comes after an extraordinary journey of 14 years, which took him from hiding in the Ecuadorian embassy to prison in London and finally home. Now, just hours earlier in the U.S. territory of the Mariana Islands, Assange pleaded guilty to one felony charge of violating the U.S. Espionage Act and was sentenced to time served. In 2010, WikiLeaks released files relating to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Assange appeared with his lawyer, Jennifer Robinson, and the Australian ambassador to the U.S., Kevin Rudd, in a courtroom in the Northern Mariana Islands in the West Pacific.
The deal allows Assange to return to a life of freedom after spending 5 years behind bars in British custody. His freedom, however, came at a cost. The flight back to Australia cost $520,000, a price Assange will have to repay to the Australian government. His wife, Stella, wrote on X, emergency appeal for donations to cover massive US dollars 520,000 debt for jet. Julian's travel to freedom comes at a massive cost. Julian will owe $520,000, which he is obligated to pay back to the Australian government for a charter flight, VJ199. He was not permitted to fly commercial airlines or routes to Saipan and onward to Australia. Any contribution, big or small, is much appreciated. Joining us now to discuss is Julian Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, good to be with you again.
So help us understand, this flight. I think a lot of people saw this and they were like, how could a flight possibly be this expensive? What is this money for? Can you help us understand why this cost is so high?
Well, it was a special flight for Julian to take him from Stansted Airport in London via Bangkok. They had to stop and refuel in Bangkok. And then they had to stop in that island you mentioned, in the Mariana Islands, Saipan. And on that island, it's the closest US jurisdiction to Australia. And so when Julian arrived on that island, he took his guilty plea, before a judge on that island. And that judge accepted that guilty plea and sentenced Julian to time served. So he could then walk out of that court a free man. But these lengthy stopovers and complicated route, I suppose, led to the inflated cost of this flight. Interestingly, the flight tracker was for a small period of time, was the most tracked flight on the planet. It for a very short amount of time, eclipsed Taylor Swift's jet, which is the most tracked jet on the planet. So the amount of interest in Julian's freedom and his trek across the globe back to Australia, where he is now safe and sound, as you see in that video footage, was closely watched by many thousands of people around the world.
Describe to us his mental state, his mood. I mean, how is he doing right now? He must be quite elated to finally be free. What is going through his head? Have you had much contact with him yet?
I've had a couple of texts while he was on the flight. I was speaking to him every day in the lead up to when he was going to get on the jet, as the details were falling into place. I was talking to him, about how he would get to the airport. They actually snuck him out of prison very, very early in the morning. The UK authorities not wanting his transfer to be leaked to the media as long as possible. So all these little details that he was sharing with me, even up until the evening when he left the prison. But he was very excited, obviously a little bit anxious because there was those little bits that needed to be done in the US jurisdiction, but very excited to be out, talking about what he'd do when he got home, going for a swim in the ocean, listening to the Australian bird life, and just been with his family and been with his two small children who have never known Julian outside a maximum security prison. So today is a really special day, Robbie, for us. I know I've been on this show many, many times, and I want to thank you for all the efforts that you guys put in keeping this issue alive and educating the public on this issue, because it's platforms and channels like yours that really make a difference to people's knowledge of this case.
We appreciate that, and we feel very strongly, very passionately about freedom of speech, about press freedoms, and we only thought that more people should have been speaking up consistently in this clear violation of very core principles to the United States. Do you know more about what motivated the deal falling into place right now? Obviously, maybe it's just speculation, but Donald Trump had said something about Assange when pressed at the Libertarian National Convention gathering. The Libertarians have been pretty vocal about wanting Assange to go free. Did this issue finally get before Joe Biden, and did he say, why are we still continuing this? Was it just, the gears, the wheels of justice, finally turning and having this result? Do you have any idea why now this is happening?
Well, look, it's a number of things. This has been a very lengthy campaign, as you know, and there's been millions of grassroots activists working around the world on this, particularly in Australia. The Australian government has been advocating for Julian and were really key in this negotiation, this diplomatic negotiation to get Julian out of the prison and back to Australia. There was a High Court hearing scheduled for the 9th and 10th of July. Coming up in the UK courts, and that was a full appeal that Julian had been awarded, and it was strictly on the freedom of expression grounds that he would not enjoy the free expression rights that he has in the UK if he was extradited, and that, I think, was a scary proposition for the DOJ to be arguing a freedom of expression case that could affect all Europeans during an election period. So I think there was a little bit of a ticking clock there for the Department of Justice to sort this out, but the Australian government and their advocacy was key in this. And we've got to remember, Robbie, this was a guilty plea by
Yes.
Julian. He pled guilty to one charge under the Espionage Act in relation to his work, essentially to journalism. And so that is really chilling and should be really scary for all journalists around the world, because it's established this precedent that the US DOJ can now use the Espionage Act to go after publishers, to go after journalists who publish information that they don't like. And that is the first time that's ever happened. They tried to do it with the Pentagon Papers and failed. That precedent has now been wound back with this plea deal. So I think that's really, really scary. We'll be advocating really for a pardon for Julian very strongly now. Some of Julian's allies in the Congress, like Congressman McGovern, have called this deal out as very dangerous for journalists. So has Jamil Jaffer from the Knight First Amendment Institute. So there will be a real push now to secure a pardon for Julian and really unwind this precedent that's been set.
Yeah, absolutely. We will continue to talk about this case, to highlight the fact that a journalist was forced to plead guilty to espionage for simply sharing classified materials, publishing the way so many other journalistic outlets and organizations have done when they have information that they think the public ought to have a right to know. So there will be, I'm sure, continued discussions and advocacy on behalf of Julian, but it is nice to arrive at this moment where he is no longer in prison for his actions. So, Gabriel Shipton, thank you so much for joining us to discuss.
Thanks, guys.